I'm Dad.
Hi, I'm Jack, and welcome to Dad and Jack Reviews number 8, where we talk about a game called Evolution Climate. It has now evolved into Abby, and basically, this is Abby, but the game, in the game, you're designing your own species, with traits and body parts. So basically, you could give it horns, which would
That's pretty defensive, right?
Yeah, like if a carnivore attacks you, they'll get -1 population. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
Basically, you're giving them traits and adaptations to help them survive better in the cold, warm.
The climate. There's three main threats, right? Climate,
predators,
carnivores, and then
starvation.
Yeah, starvation. You gotta always feed your population. So.
And evolution climate is good because it comes with climate. So.
Right. Yeah. So the originally came out just evolution. I guess. Well, one thing I was going to say is that we came into this not really knowing much about it. I'd actually not even heard of the game until about a month ago. Apparently, there's just a regular evolution that had a lot of the same sort of mechanics, except it just didn't have the climate factor. And when I heard about this game, I was instantly hooked. We had Jack and I a couple years ago. You said you were kind of forgot about how it worked, but we had designed a game called Survival of the Fittest, where it was kind of similar in that you would take control of a different species or animal, like eagle, alligator, bear.
I remember that.
Yeah, and each one would have a different deck that had different abilities. And the cool thing about that was, if you were a weaker animal, if you could survive the 12 rounds, every game was 12 rounds. If you could survive at the end, there were multiple people who survived. Whoever had the weakest animal would actually win the game because you had to face the most difficult circumstances. Anyway, a lot of similarities in terms of the different abilities and sort of traits that they had.
Yeah.
And so I was instantly sort of interested in this one. Again, didn't know too much about it, and I actually paid quite a bit for it, way more than I paid for a game in a long time. And so we were pretty eager to get it to the table. Abs, you want to go ahead and open it for us?
Well, I'd like to mention we have a computer game similar to this called Spore. It's basically the exact same thing. But
is it pretty? So yeah. I've never actually got too much into that. There is a game called Spore by EA Sports, I think, or EA in general is the publisher. But so you make a
creature, you get to design it.
Okay.
It goes from the organism stage to like the last stage where you're exploring.
A little bit more involved in the minutia or the subtleties probably versus this, but same sort of general idea. You're creating and that's one thing I'll say that immediately drew me to the game too is this ability, and I think it's appealing to most people, right? Ability to just create a species. That's a big draw, I think. So go ahead and open it up for us.
Great stuff, as always.
Yeah.
All right.
A little bit steady here.
Ooh, there we go. Yep, here's the box.
So it is a nice, sturdy box.
We have a set of instructions here. I love this design. And there's another thing on the back.
Did you like the? Well, one thing I was gonna say for a pro, at least from my perspective,
the design,
art and presentation for sure is good. I'd say in this game.
Yeah.
Definitely.
We have this, and this is basically your guide to all the cards. And you use this if you want to see what card does what.
And I will say right off the bat, I don't know how well you can see that, but so Jack and I both said this right when we saw the cards. We were immediately reminded of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
I think this is the game. I think this. I don't know how to say this guy's last name. Dominic, whatever. He's the same guy that designed Wits and Wagers. I think I read somewhere that he was a former Magic the Gathering pro player, which would make sense. I mean, you can definitely. It's got a similar vibe, right? The cards seem very similar to Magic the Gathering, and you even have them like color coded, where each of the different colors for the types they signal, different tendencies. So like the white ones are defensive.
Green is eating.
Yep. Blue is like the climate.
Red is carnivore.
Right. And they do have a cool thing on the back of these player aids. Now, unfortunately, they only give you 2. But they have a cool, like, sort of mechanism for naming your species, too. So I kind of thought that was pretty cool.
It's 3, right?
No, just 2. 2 of those.
So
I thought it was 3.
No,
you
there's
could
2. That's the
have
rules.
as one of your creatures a Champa Nibble.
Chomp and nibble.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah.
So
Chomp and nibble.
this is your base for creating your species. You have your population and your body size, which we'll get into in a bit. And
So those are the 2 main aspects of your species that
Yeah.
you control. Here, I'll give this a little bit closer shot here.
Examination.
Yeah. So we have body size, population, and then your food that you would accumulate during each round goes up here. You can accumulate food up to the population that you're currently at. So you'll start off with the cube and the 1 for both body size and population, and then throughout the rounds you'll hopefully get those up.
this is the food that you put in there. There's plants on one side and then meats on the other side. For your carnivores, which are a pretty important part of the game.
Oh yeah. Without carnivores, this would be kind of boring.
I think that's true, actually. I wanted to kind of get into that later once we kind of do a brief overview of the way the game works.
I'd say that's kind of a con because
Yeah.
if most people didn't go for carnivores, it would be kind of boring.
Right, so the carnivore is a totally different type. It affects, how you feed is totally different. And I totally had the same thought that if nobody went carnivore or adapted their species to be carnivore, it would be kind of a much more boring experience.
This is a carnivore card.
Yeah, I know I can get up here
It's
easier.
felt like a white tiger, but not a white.
Now, there's a lot of these carnivore cards in the pile of cards.
Yes.
So most of this game, right, is these cards.
And you can tell which ones the cards that are specifically made for carnivores. Because see, this carnivore card, it has a red outline, and that's actually pretty neat. The colors on the outside tell you
Right.
what it's made for.
So red's aggressive. That's the carnivore type.
So you'll have 2 main styles of play: herbivore and carnivore.
Yes.
And we were also talking about how there's some omnivore because there's
Yeah.
a scavenger card where
Ooh, I
a
saw
normal herbivore, right, can also eat meat whenever a carnivore feeds.
Like after
So-
a carnivore feeds, a herbivore can eat 1
Meat, right. What's this one?
that. Scavenger.
Oh, the scavenger card, yeah.
But I mean, there's no way to make one that can normally eat meat and
Plant.
yes.
Yeah. So Jack's been disappointed in that. He wishes there was a little bit.
Well, not necessarily disappointed, but I'd like to see it in an expansion.
Okay. Duly noted. Hopefully the designers took note of that as well if they're
So-
watching this.
Yeah.
Now we should allude to there's a flight expansion already,
Yes.
and then is it Oceans? There's the water
Yes,
one that they're
oceans,
coming.
I think.
I think it might have come out already, or it's just about to come out. What's this
So
one? You want me to show it?
we showed the carnivore style of the game. This is the herbivore style. My dad used this a lot last time.
Fat
Dad,
tissue, yes.
Just hoard as much
I like my
food
fat.
as you can.
That
just
enables
trying
you to kind of hoard the food, get a lot more of the
And this
food.
as well.
There's a lot of these different traits.
Both of these you can tell have the green outlining. That's herbivore.
And that's
Well,
again
not
more
necessarily.
feeding.
Yes,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
feeding.
Oh, same thing.
So most of the game is these cards, and what are there? What did we decide? Was there like 22 or 23 traits? And basically, that's what all the cards are. Just these 22 or 23 traits. And there are these climate cards. Which
Yes, because that's kind of a big part of evolution climate. That's what sets it apart from evolution.
is the climate part.
So
Well, go ahead.
these cards, basically when
It starts here.
Yes, and certain cards that you'll play down.
We'll get into the round here in a second,
okay.
but
Certain cards that you play down will affect how it moves.
how this thing moves. It's going to either stay the same, get colder, get warmer, and then it might encounter one of these cards if it gets to that spot, which then triggers certain sort of events.
Like this one. This one's a good example. So this has 3 suns. So if we put those in there, if one of us put that in there, then that would be greatly
3
affected.
suns down here. Go
It
ahead.
would be
sorry.
affected to go to that side. And if it goes that way, that's good for us because over here is a heat
Well, should we
wave.
go ahead and kind of go through a round, I guess?
Yes.
Because
Yeah, we should.
so at the beginning of your
Let's go.
turn, so you're going to draw a certain number of cards. Basically, everybody's going to, if you don't have a species board at the beginning of your turn, you get one. So everybody's going to start round one with you're going to get a species board right away. You take a cube, put it in level 1 of the population and level 1 body size, and then everybody immediately draws cards 4 plus the number of species you have. So it's hard to control in this game, a lot of species, I found. But one extra bonus I think that a lot of people don't think about is that you do increase the number of cards you can draw at the beginning of each round, if you can keep them alive. So it'll be 4 plus however many species you have. But then immediately the next thing you do, and this is what we were trying to explain or get into, is you will play a card. Everybody has to do this face down here. That will determine how much food is put in, this is called the watering hole, and how the climate will be affected for that round. And so that's what Abby was mentioning, right? Some of these cards have either suns or in this case, right, like a snowflake. So what we'll do, let's pretend we all put 3 cards there.
Yep.
Right, later in the round, not immediately. You would reveal these. And since there's way more snowflakes, right? This is going to end up moving over 1 to the cold side, which would trigger this card.
Make it way hot.
So this means that if you have 5 to 6 body size, then you are wiped out.
You would lose 1 population.
Oh.
So in the heat, you don't want big creatures.
But in the cold,
Right.
you do.
In the cold,
In the cold, you want some fat.
the cold benefits the bigger size creatures, and the heat, or at the smaller size creatures, can survive longer. So you gotta kind of factor that in. I'm gonna get into some of my pros and cons later, and actually one of my cons is gonna be that
The weather doesn't really change.
climate doesn't really play as much of a role as I wish it would.
Yeah.
But more on that later.
So there are certain cards that will help you against climate. They must be unique to evolution.
Climate, yeah, like the fur. Yeah, there are certain traits I think they introduced. Yeah,
Like heavy fur.
yeah.
And burrowing.
Yeah.
Where is that? So after you play, so you draw the cards, and then you play the climate cards face down. But then immediately after that, starting with this is, you always have to mention, right?
The
Amazing first player token.
Yeah.
So you randomly decide first player. All right, let's say it was me. Then starting with me, I do like this aspect of the game. On your turn, you take all your actions at once, and you can play every card. Right, every card is basically an action, and you can play them all in this turn, or you could actually save them all for the next turn. I really like that aspect of it. Invest now, right, and use all your stuff, or try to save some and really do a meaningful turn later. But anyway, so I would take all my turns. What are the things you can do? You can discard a card, right? It would go up here to increase body or population. You would just move it over 1. I could discard a card, increase body size. I could discard a card to introduce a new species, and then I'd start with 1 and 1 on those. Or, and this is what you do a lot of times, you could put down a card in front of one of your species, right? And that's going to be it evolving and then adapting in a certain way. So let's say I did that, right? And then the next person would take their turn, spending as many actions as they want with their cards. And then after everybody takes their turns using all their cards in the ways they want, then we reveal all the face down traits, and everybody sees. This is a really exciting part of the game because everybody sees what everybody was up to. Oh, he turned that into carnivore, right? And so it's like, who's going carnivore, right? She's going carnivore here.
And they don't know what they're gonna be, so they could be totally unprotected.
Dad's
Right.
a carnivore too.
Everybody's a carnivore here.
With pack hunting.
Yeah. So we reveal the cards. Then certain cards, if they have a little icon in the corner here, then before we reveal the climate cards, right? We wouldn't have actually revealed those yet. Before we reveal those, any card with that sort of symbol is going to have an effect that's resolved then in the corner there. But then after that, we reveal the climate cards like we discussed earlier. That's going to affect the climate. right? If there's more snowflakes, then it's going to get colder. If there's more suns, then it's going to get hotter. In addition, the main component of that is it's going to determine how much food is available for the round. So if these were the 3 cards we selected, there'd be 1 plus 2 plus 4, so 7 total, plus wherever the climate is, right? However that's affecting. Let's say, for the sake of an example here, it was freezing. What I say that was 10. It would actually subtract then -8 because that's where the climate was. It was -8 right there. So that's going to affect the food. We would, as a result of that, right, whatever the sum food is that's supposed to be put out there, we put on the watering hole. And then, right, you resolve any climate cards that are out there, but then it's time to feed, what the game's really about. So starting with the first player, right, you take turns feeding one of your species if possible. So to feed a species, okay, if it's an herbivore, right, not a carnivore, okay, if it's a carnivore, it's going to have a red card in front of it that says carnivore. Otherwise, it's eating from the water hole, right? You just take one at a time, unless you have a certain trait that lets you take more than one at a time. And you put it there on your food, up here on the food tracker, one at a time. Like I said, unless you have something that gives you 2 at a time. You just put it up there, then it would be Jack's turn to select a species of his that he wants to feed. Now, why are you taking 2, Jack?
Because I have this special foraging card. It lets you foraging. Yeah, that's what it is, foraging. And every time you take a plant food card, you get to take an extra. So
that's why he took 2 when it was his turn.
Yeah.
And then Abby would go. Now she's a carnivore.
And I have population 6 and body size 6.
Nice. She so since she's a carnivore, she never eats plant food ever.
Never.
She has to eat a species instead, and if need be, possibly her own other species if she had another species, and there was no other species to eat. So the way that works is she can eat any species that has a smaller body size than hers. That's why if you're a carnivore, you want to really try to bulk up usually. So the way that works, let's say she ate Jack, right? She has a bigger body size. She gets food from the food bank, not from the watering hole, from the food bank.
To the print's body size.
Right, equal to Jack's body size here. And in addition, his population goes down 1. Yeah. And if he was already at 1 to begin with, then he's extinct. And we should talk about real quick how extinction works, because that's going to happen.
Yes, it's going to happen.
So one thing I like about this game, I've talked to Jack about this, is when you do go extinct, not all is not lost. Like he had 2 traits up there. He has to discard these, but then he immediately gets to draw 2 cards. And so those are, again, basically actions that he'll get to use immediately to reinvest. So all is not lost. So you go around, you keep feeding. Sometimes there's a lot of food up here. Sometimes there's very little. I do like that aspect of the game, the variability in terms of how much food's available. Sometimes there's, like a lot of those first few times we played, there was tons of food there.
Yeah, but then towards the end,
then it would always get really depleted.
Because people had more population and therefore could eat more food, and it depleted quickly.
But then the last few games, though, there was very little food at the beginning, it seemed like. And I think, again, that's probably because we were playing certain climate cards. But but anyway, that's how the game generally works. You go around and around, feeding until there's no food left or everybody's full, right? Because you can only take food up to the population for each species. So that's why you want to get the population bigger so you can get more food, because food is where most of your points are going to come from. And by the way, they do give you these cool bags.
Yeah.
One of the negatives I'm going to point out is the value overall for the money that you pay. When I say that, though, I don't think any of the components are bad. I actually think all the components are good, right? We talked about the presentation.
Expensive.
It is expensive compared to kind of like what you get, right? This is literally it, like a pile of cards and, a board and some bags. Compared to, what I've gotten in like $26 purchases, I might as well just get that out of the way. Like the value, there's not as much in the box, I would say. Yeah. Now the game, again, is...
It's like a mystery box on eBay gone wrong.
I guess, except I kind of knew what I was getting. And that's, again, I don't regret my purchase, as I'll get into later. But it is worth noting, I think, that for what you pay, at least in my experience, I've gotten way more for like half the purchase price. But the reason I guess I brought that up is because having said all that, right, and that is a negative in my mind, a slight negative at least, the components are nonetheless good, right? These bags are awesome. And what you do at the end of the round, whatever food you've accumulated, you put in your bag, and that's going to be points at the end. 1 point per food. And then a new round would start. You would rotate the first player marker, deal out cards again, and everything would proceed just like we talked about. So that's basically
Evolution.
Yeah, I think that's basically the game.
Evolution.
All right, pros and
Not
cons. Let's get it going.
Yeah, let's get it going. So again, I'll just reiterate for the price. I mean, most of what you're getting is I had to do the Dice Tower Tom Vassal thing. I just want to do that one time in one of these episodes. You know, there are a ton of food tokens. There's a lot of cards. There's a little climate board. There's a really cool first player marker, and there's 5 bags. And that's it. For $50, I paid.
Also, this amazing dinosaur.
Yeah.
Cool. Now, some of you are thinking, I pay that all the time for brand new games. I don't. I'm used to paying way less, right? Wait until things are on sale.
Yeah.
So, again, I just want to point out, for what you pay, again, it might be because it's still new and fresh, but I was still willing to pay that because I kind of knew how the mechanics worked, and it sounded really appealing. So I just want to get out of the way. For the money, the value could have been better, and I think along those lines, one of the things that I think mentioned this to you was I don't know why they didn't do something like, you know, a lot of these games at the beginning there's a randomizer, you might select certain traits, right, and use those, right? Maybe just include even more traits, right, like 30 or 35, and then you randomly select 22 or 23. Now I do understand that these are probably all balanced with respect to one another, and maybe it would just be really hard to do that with like 30 or 35, but I think that would add to the value you feel like you're getting and the replayability, obviously.
Well, yeah, but I mean, in that case, it would kind of be harder to adapt to other cards. It would be hard to get the certain card that you need.
Yeah, maybe. But I mean, again, you're drawing like there's going to be 20 each time, right? You just don't know which particular.
Yeah.
So you know which ones are going to be in the game because you figured them out at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
With a randomizer or whatever. I just feel like, again, that would add more to the box. I would have felt like I got more for my money, and it would have added to the replayability. Because the other thing I'll say in terms of my con is that, along with like not getting a ton in the box necessarily, is that it does feel like I've seen everything almost. You know, we played a handful of times, 2 players, and then we played with Abby, 3 players. Again, I just feel like my pro is definitely how these interact, all these different interactions between these abilities, but I feel like I've seen almost all the possible, I mean, obviously not every particular nuanced combination, but I've seen most of the way it works, you know. So that would be my other con. So I'm starting off with my cons. I do have a lot of pros to say, but those are some of my thoughts in terms of cons. What do you guys think in terms of cons?
Cons, I'd say, yeah, you aren't honestly getting that much. You know, it's a few booklets, cards, tokens, these things.
Tortoise bag.
Yeah,
Cool
dinosaur
bags.
marker. Cool bags, cool marker. But I also feel like there might have been more connections between the cards. I mean, I know sometimes they mention other cards, like there's this one card, Ambush, and it's like Ignore, Night Call, and some other thing. I actually remember this. I thought that was really cool. I want to see more cards like that.
So you want specific
interactions, yes.
Okay, well that would be, then given what I was suggesting, it would be even harder to do if you were pulling all these other ones in. But yeah, you wanted a little bit more. Okay, that's interesting. Jackie, I don't know if we mentioned this way earlier, but both you and I thought the climate could have been more of a factor, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I mean, we said it earlier, but I think we should express this more. This is kind of a big issue. It just means that it doesn't add as much as it should, I think. Yeah,
it could have been more impactful. I think I read somewhere that the designer was hoping to get like, you know, where it was an impact 50% of the time and where it was a significant impact like 10% of the time. I could really appreciate that. I like games where it has a completely different feel. Like where sometimes it's a huge impact and then sometimes it's nothing. But it just felt like in our play so far that it's really negligible how much the climate factors in. Like to the point where I really don't even consider it when I'm selecting what cards to play. Usually, now maybe that's a fault of ours. Maybe I did go into one of our games like thinking about it more and trying to use it to my advantage. But it still felt like even when it does affect things, it wasn't super significant. So yeah, and we've thought about like house rules, like if every card has snow, for example, move up 2 spaces or move that way 2 spaces instead of just 1.
But I mean, it does add though, because I remember the last game, I had an unsuccessful plan. I just got a bunch of cards that protected me in the cold. I tried to get the climate over to Ice Age.
So you were trying to do that. I remember that.
Yeah, and I was trying to make you all freeze to death. It didn't work.
I stopped it.
All right.
We should get on to the pros.
Okay, yeah. Any other negatives? I think that's really all the negatives I have to say. I mean, I feel like I've said a lot of bad stuff about the game, but I've already said all. That's pretty much all the negative. What do you have for your pro? Go ahead.
Obviously the box.
The box.
The box. Yes. We take a moment to appreciate this. The designer gets to a basic work. Look at this. Look at this. Look at all of them.
Big fan of the art.
I'm a big fan.
Is that all 3 of us? Because that was one of my pros for sure.
Art. I like the art.
The art and presentation is definitely a plus. Like I said, reminiscent of Magic: The Gathering. I would definitely agree with that. The theme in general.
Yeah.
I mean, I mentioned that at the very beginning. I didn't even hear about this game, and when I heard about it, I was instantly drawn to it because of the similarities to the game we created, but also just the idea of creating species. Like everybody likes that idea, I think.
Now, okay, one pro I had was the naming system.
Oh.
I need for this. You should really make a Crustida tortatus.
Is that the intelligent carnivore?
No.
Oh.
Crustida
Jack always has an
tortatus.
intelligent carnivore that can bypass then my defensive traits. Anyway, what's so special about that?
That is a hard shell.
Oh, okay.
It's funny.
Oh, how you can just name
Like
them.
a chompa nom.
Yeah. That is cool. I definitely agree.
So
That's
this
cool.
isn't a pro, but it's an idea. It's not an expansion. It's a game, like Evolution Plants.
So you want to do it with plants?
That's an expansion.
No, it's not, because Evolution Climate is an expansion. It's its own game.
Yeah. So you want to do something similar with plants, kind of like they did with Ocean.
Yeah.
But with the plant system.
So
Designers. Another note from Jack. Another idea.
Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, it would have to be a different system since.
Oh yeah. I will say I think it's got simple, elegant design. I think the simplicity again might undermine its replayability for me, because again I feel like I've seen a lot of it already, and you're kind of doing a lot of the same thing after a while. But I do feel on the other hand that it makes a great gateway game because it's very accessible. Again, very appealing theme, and what you're doing is very simple. Play a card for climate, play your cards when it's your turn, eat, and that's it, right?
Yeah.
So simple, elegant design, maybe a little too simple for some gamers who want something more meaty. But I think, on the other hand, a great gateway game for a lot of families, especially given the appealing theme. And the consistent playtime, too, that plays in 45 minutes to an hour, seemingly regardless of play counts. We never mentioned how it ends, but once you go draw all the cards from the deck, then the game will end. And you take out a certain number of cards depending on player count.
I think it usually lasts more than 45 minutes.
About an hour, would you say?
Maybe an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay. Yeah, I'd say closer to an hour. But those are all my pros. Do you guys have any more pros?
This
Yeah.
player one. I had to include this. Yes.
Any other pros, Abs? No.
I think it's time for the ratings.
Let's skip.
Well, I think I have one pro.
It's not the dinosaur.
No, it's not. It should be, but it's not. It's just like how they manage to put the theory of survival of the fittest, natural selection into a game.
Yeah, and it's been featured in Nature or one of some highly touted scientific journals, and it's garnered respect in terms of how it emulates real science. So yeah, I think that's a good point. Something to be said for that. So I'm starting.
Dad's rating.
So I initially rated this a little bit higher, but then after I played it a few more times, like I said, it kind of started to feel like I've seen a lot of it, so it went down a little bit, but still a good game, real good game, a game that I would probably be willing to play almost whenever. So I'm giving it a 7.5.
I thought
very good if you're familiar with my rankings.
I thought you were going to give it a 7.7.
No, not a 7.7.
I really like this game, but yeah, I feel like there could be more. I only played it once, but I feel like I know everything about it. So I'm gonna say.
Well, you remember like a lot of the interactions and stuff just from playing the one time. Yeah.
The one time, yeah.
7.28. Well, I think it would just be
repeating.
The last number repeating, right? Or can you have 2.8 repeating over?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
I don't know.
I forget these things
you can,
after
it goes 2, 8, 2, 8, 2, 8, 2, 8. If you just put it under the 8, then it'll go 8, 8, 8.
What about you, Jack?
Max. Talk about it. Ding dong. Nice.
That's an interesting 5. 7.75. So we're all pretty close, really. Those are all pretty close. Board Game Geek, this game is highly respected. 235. I was saying earlier, I think that's the highest rated game we've discussed. So highly touted. And in fact, I feel like I have this weird vibe that I'm dogging this game more than I really feel it should be, negatively talked about. But I come away, considering that it's ranked 235 by the geek community, I almost feel like it's slightly overrated. Like, given kind of my impressions.
Even more now.
But I do like it. I do like the game. But 235, that is super high. 7.5 for me. Again, a really good game. This is one of those games I think where I'll play it a few times when we get it out, but then I don't want to necessarily play it 5-10 times. I want to put it away, and bring it back out later. Yeah. So we'll definitely be playing this game for the rest of our lives, probably. But it'll be one where I only want to pull out periodically. Someone likes Smash Up, yeah. So anyway, any other final thoughts, guys?
No.
All right. Well, we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you. Again, I'm Dad. This is.
Jack.
And who are you again?
Elephant.
She's Elephant. She evolved from a board game box to become an elephant that looks like a human. So thank you again. That's our review and discussion of Evolution Climate. Hope you enjoyed it.